get right now.
Mm-hmm.
Hello. Good morning. My name is Al Bridges, and welcome to Body Talk. Today is Tuesday, the 15th of August in the year of 2023. And again, you're listening to Body Talk on the No Static Radio Network. Body Talk is a program for your mind, body, and soul. I hope everyone had a great, fun, safe, and super fantastic weekend. First and foremost, let's continue to celebrate Black history every day throughout the year. Today's program, today's program is labeled Everything Cleveland. Before we get into the program, there are a couple of announcements I'd like to make. First off, as you know, a lot of our children are going back to high school and college. And from a local perspective, the first announcement I'd like to make is for JFK. On the 21st of August at 8:05 a.m., there's going to be a clap-in, which is a traditional ceremony that started maybe about the last 7 to 10 years. It's going to be a clap-in at 8:05 at Kennedy High School, which is on Miles Avenue, so I don't have the specific street address. It starts at 8:05. That's when the scholars return. Again, it's on August the 21st. Be there for breakfast, and the instruction day begins at 8:30. All students will receive their schedules in the main hallway or the cafeteria auditorium. It's a multi-purpose room. This year, the district is supplying the school supplies to every student. Again, if you're a parent, a guardian, or just a supporter or an alum of JFK, please try to be present on the 21st of this month for the clap-in. And for the college students.
I'm sorry, excuse me for 1 second. The address is 15111 Miles Road.
Okay, the address is 1511 Miles Road.
111, yes.
Yeah, 11511 Miles Road. And that's in Cleveland, Ohio. That's the address of JFK High School.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Marie.
Mm-hmm.
There's also some special students. I'm not going to give you their last names. I have a young man who's a recent graduate of Holy Name. He is attending Ohio Dominican on an athletic and academic scholarship. There's another young lady who's going into her second year at Kent State. Her name is Kennedy. Everybody calls her Kenny, excuse me. And she's not only a beautiful young lady, she's a brilliant young lady majoring in communications. And to all the students from beginning at Akron U to Alcorn State, Howard to Harvard, Ohio State to Oklahoma University, the University of Alabama to Alabama State, to Tuskegee, to Tennessee State, and all the other schools in between. I wish and pray for you to have a safe and successful academic year that also stands for the scholars who will be returning or entering JFK and all the Cleveland schools in and around Greater Cleveland, the public and private schools. Again, have a safe and successful academic year. Again, the title of this program is Everything Cleveland. And basically throughout the summer, some people call it a listening tour. I walked around, sat around, and just asked people questions, interviewed people, and listened to them about their concerns about Cleveland and some of the positive things they presented. And we're going to touch on 4 subjects here. 2 this morning, maybe from about 11:10 to maybe 11:50. And we're going to take a break and come back and try to pick up the last 2 or 3 topics here. I walked around, interviewed, listened, and the concerns that people brought forward range from the shortage of the Cleveland police officers, the medical account balance payoff the city council approved, the political landscape, and that's a broad topic, and the November election. Let's start with the Cleveland police shortage. Now what we're hearing is that city council prefers quantity over quality. And if you're not aware, during the last or the most recent budget cycle, the administration submitted a budget to have 1,495 officers, where the previous police chief, Calvin Williams, who is now the police chief in Richmond Heights, congratulations, Calvin, he recommended no less than 1,600, ideally 1,700. And one of the things that people need to understand, especially when you're speaking about police patrols, the city boundaries have not changed. They still remain the same. So the police department is responsible to cover the entire Cleveland proper. The administration recommended $1,495. They also said that they would send or have 180 officers go through the police academy. Now that's somewhat unique, but what was strange about this budget request, City Council approved it. They approved $1,495 and bought the 180 officers that would go through the academy. The administration did say that, well, with the advances or some technological implementation pieces, such as ShotSpotter and crime analysts to identify where crime spots are actually occurring in the city. Now, we can talk about that later. City Council said, okay, they approved it. Now, keeping this in mind, on the average, the Cleveland Police Department is losing about 20 to 23 officers per month, either due to retirement, transfers, or some people just said, I don't want to play anymore, I'm done. When you go back to the recent comments coming out of council, more so about the quantity versus quality. For those of you in the city of Cleveland and or the listeners, and again, we're listening to the Body Talk Radio program and No Static Radio Network, Cleveland is currently under a federal consent decree for multiple reasons. Multiple reasons. One of the reasons was the identification and the selection of officers. And I'm just going to mention Timothy Loman. He was involved in the shooting of Tamir Rice here. People questioned, and more so when the feds, the Justice Department, did their survey, wondered how this gentleman ever made it on the force, because he had issues from a previous department where he was coming from. That was an issue about quality. So the consent decree, in summary, basically said one of the items, identify, recruit quality individuals, men and women, black, white, brown, Asian, or whatever. Now City Council is concerned about quality. So let me give you some examples of what you don't want in quality, okay? Quantity is this. If you go to a butcher shop and you see chicken wings, raw chicken wings on sale for 10 cents a pound, and there's a sign, the butcher tells you, these wings are spoiled. They're not fit for human and or animal consumption. But you can buy all the wings you want for 10 cents a pound. But in the next butcher case, or freezer case, fresh case, you have fresh wings at $2 a pound that are fit for human and animal consumption. That's quality. So if you pick up the wings at 10 cents a pound and you pick up 15 pounds or whatever, and you try to take them home and cook them and become sick, that's on you. You selected poor quality. The other example I will share with you is if you have a pilot, a person who's applying to be an airline pilot or a jet pilot or fighter pilot in the military, and he and or she does not pass the drug screen, but you put that person on anyway because you want quantity. You don't want quality. The other thing, and keep this in mind, there are certain qualifications that applicants to any police department must meet. They must meet good moral and ethical quality standards or character standards. They must meet certain physical requirements. They must meet and be able to pass a drug screen along with making it by or passing a psychological exam. There were approximately 100 applicants for this previous class that just graduated about 10 days ago. Only 12 officers or candidates, were selected for that particular class. 12 did graduate, and congratulations to those 12. So the question that council is now asking, what happened to the other 88? So now council wants to see specifically why those other 88 candidates were not selected. Now, I'm not going to say they shouldn't know somebody from the Cleveland Police Department. It could be the chief, the safety director, or the deputy chief of human resources, or whatever his or her title might be, and come in and explain, not by name, but by candidate 1, 2, 3, or A, B, C, D, or whatever you want to do. And the question that we should be asking as citizens, do we want quantity or do we want quality? Now, there's the double-edged problem here, or sword, if I may. If we continue in the city of Cleveland to lose 23 officers per month, we are going to be down a significant number. One of the councilmen, the current chairman of the safety committee, Councilman Polinsik, said, well, this is the lowest number this city has ever had, and that goes back, I think he said 18 something. I'm just going 1867, or whatever the year was. Okay? But in 1867, there wasn't a consent decree. And the consent decree, again, let me reiterate, you have to put quality individuals on your force here. Now, if you want to waive or get a waiver from the federal government, they might do this. If the waiver is a height weight requirement and a candidate is 4 pounds overweight, maybe you waive that. That's not a showstopper. But if this person has psychological issues, or he or she has issues with gender, sexual orientation, or racial issues, that's not the type of person you want to put on your force. Now, one of the councilmen did mention, well, that's what the academy is for. That's what that 4 or 5 months training is supposed to do. It's going to turn that person around. I have some news for that individual that made that statement. No, it won't. Because no different than the police department or your military branches or your hospitals or whatever organization you might be involved in, you are extracting people a slice out of the greater society. If you recruit a racist and bring that person on, his or her orientation towards racial diversity is not going to change. That's rare. If you bring a person on who is a bigot, you have just recruited a bigot. If you bring a person on who is a thief, you have just recruited a thief. And I'm sorry, it's just that simple. How do you, and people say, well, and again, going back to the interviews, and I was asked, well, what would you do to add policemen? I said, one of the first things you do, you have to stop the hemorrhaging. If you have, and we're going to make the world perfect in Cleveland for a minute, if you have good officers on your force, determine why they're leaving. If it's a compensation issue, then address the compensation. If it's a cultural issue, meaning how the organization interacts with each other and with the administration, address it, fix it. So let's do the easy piece first. If it's a compensation issue, then there should be a retention bonus and a recruitment bonus. I used to recruit on two different levels. I recruited in the military, in the Navy, and I recruited for colleges to bring quality students onto the branch of the Navy and into Meharry Medical College. If you're recruiting college students, you entice them with scholarships. That's money. Meaning that student now goes to school at 100% free, 50%, 80%, whatever the percentage might be. If you're trying to recruit military people, especially for unique specialties, you give them bonuses. If you want to be a nuke or bubblehead or submariner, you receive a bonus. At certain times of the year, depending on what the levels are in the Navy, for specifically, you might get a $30,000 or $50,000 bonus if you decide to become a submariner, and that's as an enlisted person. Now you're not given that $50,000 on day one. You get so much after you complete what's called A school, after you complete basic training. Then you get so much maybe 6 months later, or you get so much a year later until it's all paid out. Then after, let's say your 3-year hitch is over and you've been promoted, you don't have any adverse actions, and you say, well, I'm thinking about going back home. And of course, you're getting offers from all the nuclear plants all over the country, if not the world, if you're a bubblehead, a submariner. Then the Navy will say, if you sign up for 4 more years, we will give you $50,000 or $100,000. And that's a true story. Right now, specifically for pilots in the Navy, these are the men and women who fly off of aircraft carriers. After your first hitch, they are offering some of these people a minimum of $150,000 to $200,000 to re-up. Now, I'm not saying that the city of Cleveland is going to offer a police officer that kind of money, but you can't offer them $5,000. You cannot offer them $1,500 to say, well, I'll be here for 3 more years and you're going to give me $500 for 3 more years per year for me to re-up. That's not going to happen. Make it attractive to retain the good officers, the good police officers in Cleveland. Again, you're listening to the Body Talk program on No Static Radio Network. We're here in Cleveland, Ohio. One of the things that I hear, and some of the people were police officers, said, we get treated badly. We're damned if we do, we're damned if we don't. One of the questions that needs to be asked by you, by us as citizens, don't accept the gross number of officers on the police force. We're being told it's approximately 1,195 or 1,150. The number you really want to know as a citizen is how many officers are in operational positions, or better yet, how many officers are on patrol during the 3 shifts in the city of Cleveland. Those are the men and women that answer the 911 calls once they go to dispatch. You have to back out, subtract, depending on where your accounting skills are. You back out the command staff, you back out all the specialized bureaus such as the Detective Bureau, the Tactical Unit, which a lot of people call SWAT. You back out the technicians and everybody else who does not patrol the streets of Cleveland in a zone car. Those are the men and women that answer the calls. I'm going to mention a specific person. The council representative from Ward 1, he has written a speech and says, well, there should be more black officers in the city of Cleveland. Well, let me answer that for him. I really don't give a damn what color you are. If you show up at my house and I dial 911, I don't care if you're black, white, brown, or an Asian. I don't care if you're a man or a woman. I only care about 2 things. Well, actually 3. 1, you showed up. 2, you were professional and you did your job. It's a problem across this country that recruiting black officers just because we live in a predominantly black brown city doesn't mean you have to have predominantly a black brown force. That if that's the case, all the city council should be black. All the mayor's cabinet should be black. But it's not. That gets into that word diversity, inclusion, and equity. And I said it backwards for a reason, because the acronym is usually DEI. I pronounced it DIE. Do you really care if a black officer shows up at your house and responds, or a white officer, or Asian officer, or a female, and says, I'm responding to your call, sir or ma'am. How may I help you? Are you going to say, well, you're not black. I don't want to talk to you. And somebody was shooting in your neighborhood or at your house. I don't want to talk to you. Let's put it in an everyday analogy. You're in a hospital, and this happens across this country now, where a nurse will walk in, and I don't care if he or she is black or white, as long as that nurse knows what they're doing and treats me with a level of high respect and regard. And people have said, and these more so go to European patients, well, I don't want this black nurse touching me. The charge nurse will come to his room, at her room, and he or she could be black and say, now, are you saying you don't want a black nurse to touch you? Well, I hate to tell you, every nurse on this floor is black, so that means you're not going to get nursing care. Or, I don't want to have a black physician. I'm going to use Meharry Medical College, who has admitting privileges at Metro General Hospital. And some European, it can even be a black person, but let's say some European says, well, I don't want a black doctor treating me. Well, this is where you've been admitted. And I hate to break your heart, 99.9% of the physicians that are here are black. Now, if you want to be discharged, and we can discharge you and say that, well, against medical advice, you want to be discharged. But maybe you want to go over to Vanderbilt or St. Thomas Hospital or Baptist Hospital, but your insurance isn't accepted over there. So now you're going to have to swallow that bill, buddy.
Right.
So literally and more directly, I'm tired of hearing from that council person that the majority of the Cleveland Police Department should be black. No, it should not. I'm also tired of hearing, well, this is a nationwide problem. Well, I don't know about you. When I receive my mail that says Cleveland, Ohio,
I know that's right.
It doesn't say nationwide. It doesn't say Detroit, doesn't say Chicago, doesn't say this. He also made a comment that, well, the people in leadership in the police department have been there too long. Well, first off, define what too long is.
Yeah.
Define that. That's undefined. He never says that. It's too long. So let me just hypothetically make up a 10-year. 25 years. 10 years. Let's say 10 years. So the chief of the Cleveland Police Department has been there more than 10 years or in the force for more than 10 years. Let's just extend that to every other position in the city of Cleveland, especially those on city council. If you've been on city council more than 10 years, it's time for you to go. Because you just said this man or woman who happens to be the chief, who's been there more than 10 years, about 30, if you've been there 10 years and he's been there 10 years and you say he's been there too long and you've been there 10 years in council, that means you've been there too long. So take yourself home. Retire, resign, whatever you need to do. Sometimes you do need what's called that internal intellectual memory. Now, you could bring somebody from outside, and let's go back when Mayor Bibb was first elected, approximately 2 years ago. He said he was going to do a nationwide search for a police chief because he fired Calvin Williams. But Calvin also announced that if Frank Jackson wasn't going to run, he was going to retire. And it basically came down to one issue. Justin Bibb, while campaigning, he supported Issue 24. Calvin Williams did. So more so as a political statement to garner votes, he said he's going to fire Calvin Williams. For lack of better terms, he did because Calvin left. Nationwide search. Nothing against the current chief, Chief Drummond. The nationwide search lasted about 7 days and 15 minutes. He said, I found my ideal candidate standing right here next to me. At the time, he was the deputy chief. You know, if you bring somebody outside of the system, and I'm not saying that there are not internal issues here. Organizational behavior teaches you that, or you should know that. But if you bring somebody from outside, most outsiders who come into a system that they weren't raised in, if I may, or part of at some point in time in their life, their tenure is short because they have to rely upon the people that are there. And if you're bringing them in to do, quote unquote, a cleanup job, that's a battle. That's a struggle. Calvin and Chief Drummond, currently Drummond, they're doing the best that they can with what they have to work with. And keep in mind again, as a city council member, your responsibility is oversight and legislation. You approved the 1495 number. And I do not recall ever hearing anybody ask, how did you reach the 1495 number? What math or what metric did you use? Is this a quote unquote a chief law enforcement organization's metric that you came up with based upon the population? Did you consider what's going on? Still on the police piece here. Everybody talks about the stolen cars, the Hyundais and the Kias. There's also other cars being stolen. Do not think that Chevys, Toyotas, Hondas, Fords, and whatever else might be out there are not being stolen. They are. They're being stolen. Cleveland is averaging 50 plus stolen cars per week. 50. But there's not a stolen car unit in Cleveland. The mayor could have, with council's support, reenacted or reinitiated the stolen car unit in the city of Cleveland. The positions that I've held and the people that I've spoken to, not only interviewing, but I'm talking about career-wise, what you believe, you fund. What you fund, you support. There's not a stolen car unit in Cleveland. So when you're, God forbid, if your car is stolen, you can dial 911. It can be taken out of your driveway, out of your garage, out of the grocery store parking lot, or whatever, if you're in Cleveland. 9 times out of 10, an officer is not going to respond. You can fill out a report online or go to the closest police district and fill out a report and hope your car is recovered. Still on the stolen car piece here. Granted, what was it, about a year ago, give or take, where somebody on YouTube posted how you can steal a Kia and a Honda in 15 minutes or 15 seconds or whatever it was, because there's no anti-theft measures on those particular vehicles. So whoever, older adults or kids, were stealing these cars. It became a game, a YouTube challenge, I think, if I recall. That's what it was labeled, a YouTube challenge. Interesting. If you listen to certain media outlets, you are being led to believe that every car stolen in the city of Cleveland is stolen by a juvenile. That basically means a kid from whatever age up to 18, or technically 17, because you reach the age of majority by the Ohio Revised Code in Ohio at 18. So We're being led to believe that every car being stolen in the city of Cleveland, especially Hondas and Kias, are being stolen by kids. That's not true. It's definitely not true. I'm talking about Cleveland proper. Now, some people from Cleveland might venture into Mayfield, Avon Lake, or whatever and steal cars. That's Avon Lake's and Mayfield's issue. But the cars being stolen in Cleveland, the majority of them are not being stolen by juveniles. The majority of assaults, homicides in Cleveland are not being accomplished by juveniles. They're not. You're listening to the Body Talk program on No Static Radio Network here in Cleveland, Ohio. All throughout this city, in most cities, but we're going to talk specifically in Cleveland, the fear and the blame game, or the blame game and the fear game, explodes. Let's blame the kids. Let's blame the kids. Let's blame the black kids. Let's blame the white kids. Let's blame the brown kids. Let's blame the Asian kids. Nobody, including me, supports or condones the behavior of what these kids are doing and what some adults are doing. But I'm not going to sit here and let anybody blame the kids across all cultures for the issues or problems in the city of Cleveland. Stop the fear mongering and blaming the kids. Now, one other council person said, well, we need to take the handcuffs off the police department and let them do their job. That was the council president, Blaine Griffin. Take the handcuffs off. But he was the one, so many years ago, who said the police department is out of control. They need to be handcuffed in their behavior. And there were some bad policemen out there doing some crazy wrong things. The majority of the Cleveland police force, those are good men and women out there trying to serve and protect you and I from whatever goes on out here. And most of the time, the police force is reactionary. They respond, they react to what they are told to do. They receive a call, they show up. They cannot walk down the street with you or with me. They are a reactionary force. So now he wants the handcuffs taken off. You also hear in council, well, there's no pursuit policy. Yeah, it is. I say yeah, I didn't say yes. Yes, there is a pursuit policy in the city of Cleveland. That was also reviewed and revised by the consent decree. Because if you remember the 138 shots, that perpetuated the change in the pursuit policy. Paraphrasing, a zone car has to radio their supervisor, we just witnessed a felony or whatever, it has to be a felony. Can we pursue A, B, and C? That supervisor, that sergeant has to say yes or no, or he or she, the supervisor, can break off the pursuit at any time. Let's take a soft stop for a minute. Law enforcement can be messy sometimes. It's just like baking. If you bake a cake of bread in your house, in your kitchen, you're going to have flour on the floor or on the counter. Certain things that policemen do in the execution of their duties can get ugly. And I don't mean by them shooting somebody who is being pursued, decides they're going to take off at 120 miles an hour, lose control of the car, and hit a pole, and they're going to go flying through the windshield. That's not the officer's fault. That's the person driving the car at 120 miles an hour because they had They had two decisions to make: stop and pull over, or take off. They took off. Don't blame the police for that young man, young girl, people in the car, older person in the car who might be driving, gets killed. That's not the police's fault. Now, if the police are pursuing somebody and they say, we're getting ready to go through a school zone and it's 2 o'clock, they will break off that chase because that puts those kids in that school zone at risk. Don't believe when you hear a councilman from Ward 1, Ward 6, or whatever say there's no pursuit policy. That's an outright lie because there is one. You're listening to the Body Talk radio program on the No Static Radio Network here in Cleveland, Ohio. Let's circle back to this recruitment piece again. If you know any police officers, family or friends, ask them, would they remain on the force if their pay was bumped up? Ask them if they would remain on the force if the administration bonused them a retention bonus to remain on the force. Now, usually what most people will tell you when you go apply for a position, don't take the job based upon the money, based upon the compensation. Don't take that job unless that's what you want to do. Being a police officer in the city of Cleveland is dangerous. There used to be rules of the street, and that goes back years ago. You didn't fool with children, you didn't fool with seniors, you didn't fool with schools, and you didn't fool with churches. And you definitely never shot at or did anything with the police officer. Those rules don't exist. We have people who are lawbreakers who shoot at policemen, who ram their cars, who kick their cars, who do whatever. The rules of the street are gone. It's dangerous out here to be a police officer. It's dangerous. Anytime you get a 911 call and it's a priority one, that means you're responding lights and sirens. If you don't think those two men and women in that zone car, that their heart rate doesn't go up, their blood pressure increases, then something's wrong with you. Or they respond to a priority one call of shots fired. They don't know if that man or woman who fired that weapon is still in the area. They are on guard. Any person stepping out of a police car on a call can lose his or her life in a second. And if I have the data right, a starting officer in urban city Cleveland makes $53,000. While you're in the academy, you only get paid $15 per hour. Right up the street or down the street, depending on where you live, in Akron, you get paid as if you are a first-year officer while you're in the academy. That says to me, if I was in the Akron Police Department trying to join, wow, you care about me. You're paying me as if I'm on patrol. There's several officers who went through the academy. They have to take out loans to live.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the people want to be policemen. That's a definite thing. I want to be a police officer. He or she might walk away from a $60,000 a year job, or whatever the case might be. But they go into the academy making $13 to $15 an hour, and you want them to live in the city of Cleveland on that? That means you don't care. Treat the people, when you onboard them into the academy, treat them with some respect.
Mm-hmm.
Pay them. I'm going to sound like a kid. Show them some love. You want me to stay on the force? I've been here for 5, 6 years or 3 years. And you say, are you going to stay? Well, no, I got offers to go some other place. Well, we can give you, there's a bonus that we can offer you. How many, and you're listening to the Body Talk Radio program on No Stack Radio Network. Back in November of 2022, the administration sat in safety committee meeting and said, well, we're in the midst of identifying a marketing firm to help us with the recruitment and retention, more so the recruitment of police officers. Now, that's November 2022. Last time I checked the calendar, as I said today, is August 15th of 2023. That marketing firm doesn't exist. It's not in place. How many of you listen to what, WZAK, WERA, the ESPN station, AM 850 or whatever? Mm-hmm. Have you heard of a commercial from the city of Cleveland about come join the Cleveland Police Department or safety forces? How many of you watch television? I'm not saying everybody needs to watch the news, but do you watch the news? Do you watch it during the afternoon? Channel 19, 853. Have you heard any commercials? Come join the Cleveland Police Department. Have you seen anybody stand in your place of worship for 6 minutes or outside in the parking lot in their dress blues or whatever the uniform of the season is and say, please join the Cleveland Police Department? The people I spoke to, they said no. Not a word. Nothing. So let's go back and I'll say it again. What you believe in, you fund. What you fund, you support. November 2022, a marketing firm was supposed to be put in place. Let's give them 45, 60 days to identify somebody. A firm. It is August. The firm's still not in place. I have a commercial I'm willing to give. I'll do it for free. Do it for free. Take pictures of community members, from babies to toddlers to middle-aged, teenagers to older seniors, and have them stand up there and say, we need you. Please join the Cleveland Police Department. We need you. That's all you got to do. Now, that might be a yoky-doke commercial to somebody, but at least that's one. I've not heard one. Not a one. But our city council let, what is that, December and 8 months, that's 10 months, almost a year go by, and watch 23 officers a month depart the Cleveland Police Department with no recruiting marketing program at all. Now, there's a recruitment team out there. I'm not saying there isn't. And I'm not everywhere, and if you are, that's good for you. Makes you somebody special. But I haven't seen them at all. You listen to the Body Talk Radio program on No Stack Radio Network. The last thing I'm going to say about recruitment. In and around Greater Cleveland, and this is a conservative number, you have 12 to 18 colleges and universities. How many policemen or the safety forces have attempted to recruit out of those colleges? Cleveland State, John Carroll, Case, Ursuline, Notre Dame, Lake Erie College, Baldwin Wallace. How many Cleveland police officers in the recruitment team have shown up at those colleges? The last thing that I heard is that college tuition is expensive. Wouldn't it be nice if the Cleveland Police Department grab somebody who's maybe in their second year, and I'm not saying everybody's struggling who's a second year sophomore student in college. Say, if you join the Cleveland Police Department, we have a tuition assistance program. We'll pay 50% or 90% of any course you take as long as you get a C or better. Books are on you. Not only are you getting a more competent or highly educated police force, you might even get that thing called a better diverse force that everybody screams about. I really don't think you'll ever have an all-black police force in the city of Cleveland. You will never have an all-black police force unless there's 4 people in town and all 4 of them decide to join the police force who happen to be black. That's all I want to say about the recruitment and retention of the Cleveland police officers. Ask your council representative to stop taking the gross number of officers on the Cleveland police force and ask them for the number that are patrolling in your zone. That's the number you want to know. Let's move on here. Mentioned stolen cars earlier. There was 2 individuals who work for the city of Cleveland who used the term for these children. They didn't identify them by culture, which is fine. They call them animals and thugs. These animals and these thugs out here doing whatever. That's interesting. We let 2 people call our children animals and thugs. Again, let me preface this. I don't condone nor support what these children are doing. But I'm not going to let somebody call our children animals because what comes out of your mouth is what you think. You know, there's a biblical scripture, and I'm going to paraphrase it, that out of the mouth of babes comes the truth. And somebody, I don't care if they're black and or white, calls our children animals, what he is saying at the point in time of their arrest and their adjudication, they can be treated like animals. Now, if you're from Cleveland, most of you are familiar with the gentleman by the name of Dick Goddard. He fought for the better treatment of domesticated animals. But we just had a councilman call our children animals. Their behavior is deplorable, but they're not animals. We let our children down. We let them down. The school system in Cleveland is not the best. Now, there are some success stories that come out of Cleveland. That's rare. That's just like finding a diamond in your yard when you're trying to plant a tulip. That's rare. We have children who don't have the ability to read. We have children who are illiterate. We have children who are functional illiterates. We have children who can't even complete a job application, let alone discern a bus or rapid schedule. We have children living in neighborhoods that are lead infected. We have children living in neighborhoods that are dilapidated. We let our children down. I'm not going to call our children animals. That's just like somebody calling your mother the B word. I have a friend who had the best answer for that. Did your mother have puppies too? Don't let anybody anybody demean our children. Our children are our future. Again, I'm going to say it. The behavior of our children is not the best, but they are not animals and nor are they thugs. I'm going to say this, and it's going to upset a whole heap of people, and I don't care. This white man stood up there and called our children animals, and the black representative sat there numb and damn dumb. How dare you? How dare you let somebody, even if that man would have been black, you should have jumped up and said, oh, hell to the never know. It's unacceptable what you said. I demand an apology from you. You owe every child, every family in this city an apology. Because he was wrong. And the ones who sat there and didn't say anything, they're just as damn guilty. Don't accept that from anybody. You're listening to the Body Talk program on the No Static Radio Network. I'm going to add one more thing to this. Depending on what your experiences are, makes you who you are. It makes you who you are. Now, if you live in a home where your parents call you animals and thugs, that's how you were raised. That's what you're going to accept. I wasn't reared that way. As I got older, I was put in certain situations where I was called outside my name. But my parents taught me one thing that I will take to my grave. Don't you dare let anybody call you anything but what we named you. I've been called the N-word and some things that are worse. And I did not accept it and will not accept it. Our children are not animals. If you accept that, then I feel for you. I really do. You're listening to the Body Talk radio program on No Static Radio Network. Right before the break, I'm going to touch on this and we'll come back to it. There's the political landscape in Cleveland. It's changing, thank goodness. And I don't mean necessarily by who sits in what chair. The political landscape is more so determined by the voters, even if you voted in the last election or you didn't vote. I don't care what your political affiliation is. I don't care if you're Democrat, Republican, Independent, Communist, or Socialist, or Green Party, or whatever. All right? Recently, during a community event, a councilman was introduced. He stood up and people began to boo him. People booed this person. Down. You haven't done a thing. Quote, unquote. I will say this. 4 or 5 years ago, that would have never happened. Never would have happened. Never. That means people are becoming aware of what they signed up for, and they don't like it. The landscape in Cleveland is changing. If you go back a week ago, about a week ago, State Issue 1 failed. It was voted down, 61% to 39%, overwhelmingly. And that meant that regardless of party affiliation, a lot of people crossed over and voted no. Granted, Issue 1 was supported by, quote unquote, the Republicans. To change the state constitution, to say it would take 60% to amend the Ohio Constitution instead of a simple majority. People crossed over. White women, white men, black men, whatever. 61%. If we were on the playground playing a basketball game, that would be an ass kicking. 61% said no, not going to happen. So let's zoom the calendar ahead here. Let's zoom it to November. Three issues are going to be on the ballot here. One dealing with the abortion law in Ohio, the marijuana law, and PB Cleave. Just based upon what happened in State Issue 1 in Cleveland, just Cleveland. I'm talking about outside, I'm talking about Cleveland proper. Those three issues are going to pass. They're going to pass. It's not if, they are going to pass. And if you've listened to me on this program before, I do not tell you how to vote. I encourage you to vote. But those three issues are going to pass. I encourage you to do your homework on all three issues. I will tell you this, I support all three issues, but I'm not telling you that's how you have to vote. You vote your conscience, you vote your character, you vote your integrity. That's what your vote means. The landscape, and I'm going to take a break here right after I make this comment. Yesterday, that was Monday, yesterday, petitions were pulled to recall the city council president and his ward. Unfreaking precedented. Unprecedented. I'm going to make a prediction. When those three issues pass, especially PB Cleave, and we're going to talk about that after the break. When those three issues pass, especially PB Cleave, the 17 sitting council members, their seats are in jeopardy, especially those who don't come out and make a decision publicly. Don't give, and I mean this seriously, do not give that private fence sitting BS. Do you support it or don't you support it? I'm talking about PB Cleave. I'm saying this to the 17 sitting councilmen. We already know that council president doesn't support it. That's not one of the reasons he's being recalled. He already said he doesn't support it. Speak what you mean. And if you don't support it, say that. Just say that. If you support it, stand up and say you do. And if you say you support it, you better mean it. You're listening to the Body Talk radio program Body Talk program on the No Static Radio Network. The one thing that, again, before we go on break here, talking about the landscape, the political landscape in Cleveland, and I don't want to say people are being woke, because I'm not that young. People are becoming aware of the mess that they live in by the people that were elected to represent them. As a public servant, you are a public servant. You're not supposed to be self-serving. And the people in the city of Cleveland are tired. When you get tired, you become angry. When you get angry, you then sit down and say, you know what, I gotta change this. And a whole lot of stuff gonna change in 25. They're tired of having people collect a check and do nothing. Mm-hmm. They're tired of having people claiming to represent them and call them stupid and ignorant, and that you don't know what you want. That came out of the mouth of Blaine Griffin, the council president in Ward 6. He called his voters. He called the citizens in Cleveland stupid and ignorant because we don't know what we want. How dare you? How dare you? You know, you hear me often make reference to my parents, and my mother was the softer one in the family, thank goodness. And she always used to tell me, if you don't have anything good to say, don't say it. This man called us stupid and ignorant. We don't know what we want. And I hope he comes to regret those words, especially when it comes to PB Cleve. And before Marie takes us to break here, back in January, the first year that Bibb was sworn in, Mr. Griffin ran to the well, if I may, in City Council and got his so-called colleagues to approve $12 million to save a shopping plaza, $6 million to bail out of bankruptcy a private firm, and $6 million to address the repairs at Shaker Square. $12 million. During that first year, the mayor said, well, as a pilot project, I'm willing to give public budgeting $5 million just to see how it goes. City Council, at the urging of the president, said they don't need that money because that's what we're here for. We're to make decisions about the city funds. One particular councilman in Ward 1 said, well, that's my money. Wow, I didn't know his name was on the general fund checkbook. They pulled the $5 million. Now we're gonna make a projection. If they would have given PB Cleveland, public budget in Cleveland, the $5 million, this referendum effort might not even be in existence today. But because they declined to hear, they declined to listen to what the citizens wanted, and there were multiple people during the public comments, during the body of the whole meeting, which takes place on Mondays in the city of Cleveland, they declined to listen. They just sat there and heard. There's a difference between hearing and listening. They didn't process. They had citizen after citizen stand up there and support PB Cleveland. So when PB Cleveland passes City Council, be on notice. Some of y'all gonna have to be looking for a job, or if you're from Sweden, a job. You're gonna be looking for a job, and put your applications in at Dave's, Walmart, Giant Eagle, and start working for a living, because some of you sitting down there right now just collecting a check. Listen to the Body Talk program. We're gonna take a 5-minute break and we'll come right back. Thank you.
Take back your life after violence starting today. Call today. Get the help you need today. If you're listening, if you're watching, the numbers on the screen, 216-644-5487. The Trauma Recovery Center of Northeast Ohio, also affiliated with the Center for Families and Children. And now back to Alan Bridges with Body Talk, a program for your mind, your body, and your soul.
Thank you, Marie, for that read about this issue, not only in several homes, it's an issue across the city of Cleveland. And I'm not going to do the normal reading that I normally do after yours. If you are in a domestic violence environment and you are a friend of that woman, more so women in this case, get her out of that environment. Take her to a safe place. Take her to the police station. Take her to the YWCA. Take her somewhere, because our black women are being abused across this city. And one of the things that is upsetting, a lot of women who are being missing now. They're coming up missing. Just 2 weeks ago, they found a black woman in a ice chest, dead, in the southeast side of Cleveland. They found another woman. Somebody who tried to literally burn her, torture and burn her. Get that woman away from that little boy. I'm not going to call him a man, because men don't do that. Protect our women. Before I go back to everything Cleveland, there's 2 books I want to mention. I'm going to discuss and reference the first one. The first one is called The Heaven and Earth Grocery Stores, written by James McBride. It's a book about the all-American mix of prejudice and hope in America. Mr. McBride is an African-American author. Excellent book. I suggest that, if you can rent it, as I call it, from the library, or if you want to add it to your personal library and share it and talk about it, please do. It's an excellent book. Again, the title of the book is The Heaven and Earth Grocery Store by Mr. James McBride. The book that you see on the table next to The Thinker is titled Command at Sea. It was a book given to me by Vice Admiral James Buckley, who at the time when I was serving with him, he was the most senior officer in the Department of Defense. The Navy had or still has a program called Retire, Retain. Admiral Buckley, Vice Admiral Buckley, at the time when I was with him, he was on his 41st year. And he was the director of what was called the INSUR Board, Survey and Inspection. And we traveled all over the world inspecting ships. He was a power plant guy. He turned me into one in the engine room. And when he gave me this book, and this is way before the internet and all that other technological doodads out here today, and I was in the Pentagon. I was serving on the Chief of Naval Operations staff. And he wrote me a fitness report, which he didn't have to do. And he made me walk on water, which I was doing anyway. But he made me walk on water, shameless plug. But one of the things, I sat down with this Chief of Staff, who was Captain Salmon, and he says, Admiral Buckley really respects and likes the hell out of you. And he gave me the fitness report. It was signed by Admiral Buckley, of course. Then the counter signature to my fitness report was a 4-star, which was Admiral Watkins, who was the Chief of Naval Operations at the time. And he said, do you know anything about Admiral Buckley? I said, well, besides him being, retired, retained, and Naval Academy grad, or brain knocker, as we call them. And he said, well, no, let me share something with you. I'm going to do it really quick. Admiral Buckley was a PT boat skipper during World War II. And he was the one who rescued MacArthur off of the Philippine Islands and took MacArthur, his family, and some of his senior staff on his PT boat to safety. And during the voyage or cruise to safety, MacArthur came up to the bridge where Buckley was steering the PT boat. And he looked at him and told him thank you. But what struck him as odd, he said, well, when I return to the Philippines, you're going to lead the PT boat invasion. And at that time, Lieutenant Buckley, which is similar to a captain in the Marine Corps, Air Force, and Army, said, well, thank you, sir. And he knew that was going to be a possibility because O3s don't lead invasions. Well, about 6 months later, Buckley got a battlefield promotion to lieutenant commander, which is a major. And then about a year later, he was promoted to a full commander, which is a lieutenant colonel. By this time, MacArthur returned. He plans to return to the Philippines. It's his famous statement, I shall return. And guess who led the PT boat invasion? Vice Admiral Buckley did at that time. And one thing that during that invasion, he was injured, wounded, several of his crew members, but he kept fighting in the battle on the PT boat. And he was awarded the Medal of Honor. And from that point forward, just not because of the Medal of Honor, his career took off because he was an outstanding officer. But the book that you see is Command at Sea. And I really never had the desire to be, and I'm not, this is an insult, I never want to be a ship driver. But Admiral Buckley, when he gave me that book, he said, you should become aware of more of the Navy traditions. And that's the Navy officer's Bible with a small b, of course, that's given to ship drivers. Because everything you want to do besides your op plans and procedures are in that book. But Buckley's instruction to me was, you also write in that book every person that you meet that impacts your career. And I did. There's some outstanding people in there that I had a chance to meet. And I'll share a couple with you. Besides Admiral Watkins, General Colin Powell, he was the senior military aide to Caspar Weinberger at the time, Secretary Lehman, and some other people, as Navy Secretary. And they did have an impact on my life and career while I was in the Navy. And, Admiral Buckley, he passed away. And Admiral Watkins, who I mentioned earlier, is Chief of Naval Operations. And when my tour was over with him, he gave me a ship's clock. And the other officers who were assigned to his staff said, well, damn, people who left before you just got a piece of paper. This man bought you a clock. I said, well, not everybody has favor. And when I sat down to talk with Admiral Watkins, he said, I gave you the clock because you taught me something I never considered before. And he said, you taught me how to value time. And Admiral Watkins is real quick. He was a bubblehead. He was one of the first submariners to break through the Arctic ice at the time. And he was a commanding officer, and the rest of his career took off. Of course, he was a ring knocker too. And what struck me about Admiral Watkins, when he retired, he called me. He called. I went to his retirement ceremony as a guest. And then he was appointed by President Bush as the Secretary of Energy. And he was confirmed, impeccable record. He was confirmed, and he called me again, and he said, well, come down to headquarters, which at that time was in Rockville, Maryland. And I did. And he said, I want to offer you a position. I want you to come work with me again. And I said, Admiral, with all due respect, my government time is over. But just an outstanding gentleman. He's also deceased. One last name I will mention before we go back to the program is Vice Admiral Lawrence, who was the Chief of Navy Personnel. He was a gentleman who actually helped bring me into the Navy. And he was a POW. He was a pilot. He was shot down, spent about 7.5 years in the Hanoi Hilton. And I got to know him very well. And he and a couple other gentlemen, one guy by the name of Commander Shenko, and the senator also served in the Hanoi Hilton together. And they, more so with Admiral Buckley, not Buckley, but Lawrence, they actually developed the TAP code, not Morse code, so they could communicate with each other in the different holding rooms or cells. And what was odd about the three of them, they all flew off the USS America, CV-66, which is an aircraft carrier. and that was the first ship that I was assigned to, CV-66. All right, let's go back to the program. But Command at Sea, if you want to go to the library or if you can order it through Amazon, excellent book. If you one of those historians, you can read it. It's really good, some good information in there. Let's go back. We left off the political landscape in Cleveland, and one of the things that strikes me as not odd but good when I say unique is that the PB Cleveland group, the steering group, and all the volunteers, within about a 8-week, 10-week period, they got over 10,000 signatures from voters in Cleveland, which put the referendum or the issue on the ballot in November. And when you meet the steering group and the volunteers, I'm not taking anything away from anybody if I say steering group, then it encompasses everybody. These are young, middle-aged, and senior citizens of Cleveland who want to have a voice. And when you talk to them independently, not collectively, independently, most of them, all of them generally say the same thing. We're doing this because our elected people don't listen to us. And we would like to have this, we want to see this, we want to do that. And they don't listen. I want to make it clear here. I'm not an anti-development person. I'm not an anti-business person. Okay? But one thing that's important, and I learned this from a former mayor of Washington, D.C., when I was doing a project with a firm for him. He said, always take care of the people who vote for you. He said, now, always listen to them earnestly and do things for them in their neighborhoods. Give them a safe place, give them a clean place, and give them a place to go relax, meaning your parks. And he said, if you do that, and he didn't mean be duplicitous, he said, when you do things for developers, it's okay because the neighborhoods got what they needed or what they wanted because you listen to them. Nobody listens in the city of Cleveland. There's a group out in Ward 1 where the old or former Grace Mount Elementary School is located on between Lee Road and 161st and Glendale and Biltmore. Empty lot. The citizens, and most of the citizens on the two streets, and more so on that in the community, want to have a generational park. The council person wants to build homes, and he said he's going to encourage the city to build homes, $250,000 homes or more, on this vacant lot across from homes that are probably at the high end value. I'm gonna be nice, maybe about 105, 110 grand at the most. Just because you build $250,000 homes across the street from $100,000 homes does not increase your property values 100%. Anybody will tell you that. Plus, if you're going to build $250,000 homes on a lot that is across the street from a fast food restaurant on one street, the other street, which would be Biltmore, there's I'm going to call it a strip plaza, but a small plaza where a gentleman, he has a legitimate business. He details cars and does stereos and window tint. Nice guy, because he's done some work for me. But on Lee Road, there's a funeral home and a Asian hair care supply company, a beauty supply company. And I don't know about you, and maybe it's just me, I'll be snobby. I'm not going to build I'm not going to take and live in a $250,000 home in a community such as that. And I'm talking about the other businesses around it, not talking about the homes, because that diminishes your value. And also, if you're in your mid-30s, early 40s, if you have children, you have to consider where you're going to send your children to school. Again, I'm not trying to say that CMSD is the worst, and I'm not going to tell you it's the best, but people have heard me say, if you have the financial and the economic means to send your child to a private school and you live in the city of Cleveland and send them to CMSD, you need to be arrested for child neglect and abuse. Because you now have to consider where you're going to come up with additional resources to send your child to a private or a charter school, more so a private school. And, I do have friends or associates whose children are in those schools. There was a guest on the show, 2 weeks ago, and she is at Halfway Brown. That's not a nickel and dime school, nor is most of the Catholic schools, parochial schools in and around Greater Cleveland right now. Okay, so you're listening to the Body Talk Radio program on the No Static Radio Network here in Cleveland, Ohio. So back to this landscape thing. So PB Cleveland passes, and maybe some of the council people in between now and the election will stand up, break ranks with the council president, and publicly say, I'm supporting this, and they mean it. Put their faces out there, put their voices out there, and they truly mean it. Now, PB Cleveland passes, good for PB Cleveland, good for the citizens of the city of Cleveland. Because I think what will occur, you'll see a different attitude, and maybe it will increase the voting turnout in most of the cities, especially Grand Rapids. The voting turnout has increased exponentially ever since their public budgeting effort was implemented. Talking about voting and turnout, back to state issue 1. Cuyahoga County led the state in the votes. It was a good thing. That's kind of typical for most elections, especially statewide elections. But this was an off year, August, crazy, trying to fool people election. In Cuyahoga County, Cleveland was last in voter turnout. Only had a 20% turnout. Cleveland, and I'm a Clevelander, and I voted. We got to do better. We have to do better. Don't stay at home and vote. Don't stay at home and say it doesn't matter. It's not important. Your vote is your voice. You have to speak up. Show that you're concerned. And again, regardless of how you vote, if you vote for or against, go vote. Make your voice known. Even if you voted against it and it passes, you still have a voice. You can still speak up. I don't want to say complain. You can still speak up. One of the things that, especially with PB Cleveland, when it passes, and I'm not saying if, when it passes, City Council gets to select 5 members to the commission, and the mayor's office select 5 to the commission. Let's do politics 1-0-0. The mayor's not supporting this, and nor is City Council. PB Cleve passes. Who do you think they're going to select to be on the commission? They're not going to select people who are in favor of this. They're going to select people who have their mindset. PB Cleve, as it's abbreviated, is sending, when it passes, it's going to send a clear signal that it's time to flip out the clowns. I'm going to go back maybe 40 minutes ago when I mentioned a councilman said, well, the police chief has been here too long. He's part of the system. Well, let me say this. Some of you down there in City Hall who claim to sit at the table, y'all been there too long too. We got people who've been there 40 years, depending on when he says it, and I'm not talking about the 40-year guy, that's Pulitzer. He's now the dean of city council, meaning he's the oldest long reigning member, tenured member. You listen to Mr. Jones, one day he says he's been there 30 years. Next day he says he's been there 35 years. That's amazing. How do you get 30 out of 12? How do you get 30 out of 12? 12 does not equal 30. It's impossible. But that's who we have in city council. The other thing is, stop and think for a minute. Stop and think. I'm going to use a statement that was coined in a presidential election by Ronald Reagan. Probably one of the most apropos statements you could ever hear from anybody running for office. He said, "Are you better off today than you were 4 years ago?" And I encourage people to take a look throughout their community, and right after the election, go take a picture where you live. Take a picture of your business district. Take a picture of the homes. Take a picture of the vacant fields and see if those homes and vacant fields are still there. See if the business district has eroded. See if the business district has expanded to bars and smoke shops or vape shops or whatever. Now, as I mentioned earlier, I'm not anti-business. I applaud anybody who wants to be an entrepreneur. But I also will say this, not every business should be a business where I live. You can go set up business if somebody wants to let you, I'm just using a vape shop as an example. If somebody in Ward 15 wants a vape shop, go over there. I don't want a vape shop. I don't want another bar. I don't want cars parked on the sidewalk anymore. I don't want people shooting at night anymore. Now that's going to happen, quote unquote, because no city is crime free. But certain businesses do bring unsavory characters and behavior. Just take a picture. Ronald Reagan said, "Are you better off today than you were 4 years ago? If you're not, then why are you still electing the same people?" And with full disclosure, yeah, I know some people who ran for city council in and around the city, also in Ward 1, and we are worse off in Ward 1 today than we were 4 years ago. It's terrible. No vision, no nothing.
Mm-hmm.
No nothing. Won't even answer a simple question. You won't even have, we requested to have the city prosecutor come speak to the community about domestic violence, assaults, sexual assaults, etc., along with the lead in the police department and the rape crisis center. That boy canceled it.
Mm-hmm.
Because he said there was going to be a ruckus crowd there. And you know who showed up? People on walkers and wheelchairs and a lot of seniors. And there were 7 policemen there. And I knew a couple of them said, "Hey, what are you guys doing here?" Well, they said it was a ruckus crowd. And he looked around and there was Mr. or Mrs. and somebody else limping because they got bad knees and somebody else got a bad back. And I said, "This is a ruckus crowd." And I said, "Well, what is 6 or 7 of you doing here?" He said, "No, it's just us at the door." And I said, "No, you need to go over to the parking lot."
Mm-hmm.
There are 4 other officers there on the other side of the building. And he looked at me and he said, "Y'all ain't ruckus." He said, "Yeah, we just wanted to hear certain things. We wanted to ask certain questions." And to this day, that boy will not reschedule her.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I kind of sort of know why. Because we were going to ask about specific cases. He won't let us talk to her But we know how to talk to her. You know, there's such thing called a telephone and email. I might even have her come by the house. We can talk to her. These are people who don't listen to us. They don't deserve to represent us. Because there was some, I don't take credit for things. I was talking with a woman the other day. She said, there's an absence of like-mindedness. Now, that doesn't mean you have to think like everybody, but that does mean you got to think. There's an absence of like-mindedness in the people who represent us. So when PB Cleve passes, first stand up and pat yourselves on the back, and I'm not just talking about the PB Cleve volunteers and steering committee. Pat yourselves on the back, because that means the citizens in Cleveland have spoken. They're tired. Listen to the Body Talk radio program on the No Static Radio Network. Just real quick, when I say a soft stop, the Black History Moment. As you know, I celebrate Black History 365 days a year, 366 if it's leap year. And what's unique about what I'm going to share with you, this group was featured in Forbes magazine, not Black Enterprises, not Jet, not on BET, Forbes magazine, okay? Which is technically a financial magazine. The entire Jennis family, they reside in Boston, Massachusetts area. The family has a Haitian origin. The siblings, all of the siblings attended the University of Massachusetts at Amherst. And if you're not aware with UMass at Amherst, a tough school, and I'm not saying the University of Akron, Kent State, or whatever is not tough. They only take the best of the best. You know, you got to score really high on SAT, ACT to get into Amherst, UMass at Amherst. The first sibling, graduated in 09, Vauntmere is his name. Christian in 2011, and Olivia in 2017. The parents, the mother, Chantel, the dad, Jacques, they are both physicians. Olivia has her PhD in chemistry. She's at Eli Lilly in Indianapolis. Christian has his PhD in biostatistics, data science, and mathematics. He's at Procter & Gamble down the street, Cincinnati. Vladimir, PhD in statistics. He's at a company in Chicago called ABVIE, ABBVIE. The whole Black family, physicians and or all doctorates. Featured in Forbes magazine. I'm going to paraphrase what the kids said about their parents. Our parents gave us an environment to thrive and to be educated. They encouraged us to thrive and to be successful, to be well educated. Our success is due to our parents. Forbes featured this Black family. Can you imagine two parents? It's almost like watching the Cosby Show. Claire was a physician. Dr. Huspel obviously was a physician. The whole family, when they go out to meetings, to restaurants, or whatever, and somebody hollers out doctor, the whole freaking family turns around. The whole family, all of them Black. All three children, doctorates from excellent institutions. That's the Black History Moment of the day. Real quick, because we're going to break a little bit early today. I mentioned elected and appointed people. I'm not going to call them leaders. I can't, because that would be a misnomer, a misspoken word used. These people, they're public servants. They're here to serve you. When you decide to be a public servant. You're giving yourself. You're giving yourself and your time to the people you are chosen to serve. Again, whatever your religious preferences or theological preferences are, you know, the servant mindset, servant leadership means you are here to help others. You're not here to help yourself. Now, if you do your job well, you'll keep getting reelected. If you do your job well. If you look across the city of Cleveland, and I just mentioned, a 20% turnout, the lowest in Collier County, in the city of Cleveland proper. That's not good. If you go back to the last election when the mayor and city council was all elected, you had people stand up and say they were proud of the turnout. If you look across all the wards, they average about 26 to 2,800 votes. And there's 22,000 lives in each ward. Now, that doesn't mean there's 22,000 voters with all true transparency. 2,800 votes, and you're proud of that? That's not good. That's saying that you have a lot of apathetic voters who are now dissuaded. They don't want to participate anymore. Now, if PB Cleveland encourages or increases that participation, they deserve much more money than what they've requested, what they've written for. Okay? Let people have to go back and start voting. I'm not going to pull that violin scenario. You know, our parents, our forefathers, they sacrifice and all that. No, you know, a lot of younger voters, they might remember it, they might not, and they probably don't because it didn't impact them. They don't know what it means to have a dog sicked on you, or when you walk up to a voting booth and somebody asks how many bubbles in a bar of soap, how many beans in this jar. You might guess the right answer, and they say no, that's wrong, so you couldn't vote. Or if you couldn't sign your name a certain way, they didn't let you vote. And I'm not trying to be demeaning to anybody who's young. That doesn't resonate to them because they didn't suffer through it. They're the benefactors. But take advantage of the benefit that you've been given by your grandparents, your parents, your great, what or whoever. Take advantage of the benefit. Take advantage of it. I'm going to go back about and use this Black History moment, that family. These people are from Haiti. They're from Haiti. And they came here and they took advantage of a benefit. Both parents are physicians. They encouraged, they said, children, take advantage of where you are, where we are. You can be and do anything you want, but take good advantage of it. And they did. They did. Now, before I wrap up, next week we're going to have, quote unquote, a political show. We're going to have a group come on and they're going to talk about a significant effort in Cleveland. And it's important that you listen. I don't care if you listen live, if you catch it 2 days later or a week later. Listen. There's also going to be an announcement. I'm sorry, I'm drawing a blank on his name. There was a gentleman who announced that he was running for county prosecutor. Asian gentleman. Very well educated. Obviously, he's an attorney. And, well, he's going to take on, I'm going to presume, that O'Malley, who's the current county prosecutor, will run for re-election. O'Malley, depending on who you talk to, is okay, done a great job, so-so or whatever. All right? Listen to O'Malley, listen to the new gentleman. He's not going to be on the show. But people are announcing that they're going to be running, and they're doing it early for a reason. Again, my concern to you, the listeners, it doesn't matter what political affiliation you are, you're still a voter. If you happen to be a Republican, which is fine, a Republican might not run for county prosecutor. So there'll be no primary that you can vote in. Come the general election, you have to decide, are you going to vote for the new guy or the incumbent? But make that decision. Go vote. Don't sit on the sidelines and say, oh, well, it doesn't matter. Yes, it does. It matters a lot. It also matters a lot who you elect to represent you in the given ward where you reside. Because the decisions that he or she doesn't make affects your life. It affects your property values. If you think you can sit on the sidelines and waffle and not vote, you're making the gravest error, one of the biggest mistakes. When you don't vote, that's the biggest mistake you'll ever make in your life. You guys, oh man, I didn't know he or she wasn't going to do that. Well, guess what? That one vote could have flipped that person out of that seat. That one vote, and that could be your vote. And the other thing, if you have children who are of voting age or not of voting age, take them with you when you go vote. If you opt to mail in your ballot, sit down with your children and show them how to fill out the ballot. You start what you teach your children early, they mimic. They say, well, my mother and father, mommy, daddy, grandma, whatever, voted. I'm going to vote. I'm old enough to remember walking to A.J. Rickoff with my mother and father and pulling that lever. That thing used to punch the ballot. I remember that vividly. I remember listening to my grandparents who grew up in the South talking about how they were treated when they went to go vote or why they couldn't vote. And you think I'm going to sit here and say, I'm not going to vote because it don't matter? Yeah, it does. Just real quick. The first black mayor of a major urban city came from Cleveland, Ohio. And you know why? Black folks voted for Carl Stokes. They voted. And it has nothing necessarily to do with color. And I'm going to wrap it up this way. Go vote just like you would stand in line to get a ticket to the 7th final championship game of the NBA series if the Cavs were playing. Go vote just like you would go down to the stadium if the Super Bowl was played here and the Browns were in the game. Go vote as if the Guardians are in the 7th final game of the World Series and they're playing at home. Go vote just like we did, and I hope you did, when Obama first ran for president. Go vote. There were people standing in line to vote for him in the rain. They were showing clips all around the country. There were young folks, old folks, or whatever. And it doesn't matter your reaction when the results were announced. When that man's name was announced as the president-elect, I'm going to say it, the majority of black folks in this country cried. And they weren't tears of shame. They were tears of pride. I thank you for listening to the Body Talk program on the No Static Radio Network, and I'll see you next week. Have a safe week and enjoy your weekend. Talk to you later.
I'd like to thank you for tuning in to Body Talk with your host, Al Bridges, here on the station where we don't bring no static, but we sure enough bring the noise on staticradio.net. Make sure you guys check us out on social media where we absolutely love to hear from you on Facebook.com/No Static Radio LLC, on X, formerly known as Twitter, at No Static _ Radio, on Instagram at @TheReal_ No Static Radio, on YouTube at No Static Radio, and our newest platform, Discover.tv. Also, if you guys would like to listen to replays of this show and others on NoStaticRadio.net, please make sure you check us out on Mixler, Mixcloud.com. Just type in No Static Radio, all one word, in the toolbar for replays of this show and all others. And for continuous streaming, that means no refresher to pay. Sit back, relax, let it rebuffer on its own. And you've got us on TuneIn.com, LiveOnlineRadio.net, or MediaQ for continuous streaming uninterrupted of this show and all others. And for all things No Static Radio, including up and coming events, merchandise, and an in-depth look at all our great show hosts here, please check out our website at www.nostaticradio.net. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. To stay tuned later on this evening, we've got King and Lady Grape with the Grapevine Radio Show. Hearing your voice, Revolution, NoStaticRadio.net, powered by Google, partnered with Colors, and sponsored by Lamont Avenue Wines and Cleveland Rugby League and Design exclusively. Until then, you guys, we got more music for your listening pleasure. Don't go nowhere. We'll be right back.